In 3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone to the Science and Magic YouTube channel. My name is Amanda Levesque. If you haven't listened to any of my videos yet, I love talking about all things that have to do with the nervous system. I love talking about, personal development, feminine energy, and how to really sink into our bodies and live our lives in a more whole and satisfying way. I am inviting my dear friend, my colleague, my soul sister on for a second conversation today. And we're going to talk about what feminine energy looks like in a masculine world, specifically from the lens of Yin Yang energy, which Sophia will introduce, and neuroscience, which we both have a background in neuroscience. So I'll let Sophia introduce herself, and then we'll get started right away into this delicious conversation.
Oh, well, thank you for that great introduction, Amanda. My name is Sophia, as you said. I am so grateful to be here and excited that we're having this conversation in a shared way, because oftentimes we'll get into it about things and I'm like, oh man, I should have recorded that. That's like so cool. And I wish everyone had this understanding, because as I have conversations with people, it just opens up a lot. So I'm excited to be doing this here on this platform and with this audience. So thank you to you guys for tuning in. Please share this if you find it to be relevant to you in any way, because it's exciting stuff. And I think it's really world transformational. So I am Sophia Bouwens, mother of 3 beautiful daughters. I met Amanda in our neuroscience program, undergraduate, went through that neuroscience machine, which was so exciting and so fun. I'm so grateful that we met on like the first day of college, because our rooms are right next to each other. We just like were in tandem the whole time. And then after college, I was pre-med for a while, but went on to get my master's degree in acupuncture and oriental medicine. And my eyes were opened up to this whole way of like a traditional lens of health and well-being. And it just like totally transformed my understanding. Almost was like learning what I always knew to be true. And so that's exciting. And from there, I learned a lot about like the yin and the yang cycles, and how the interrelational cycles of the earth support our well-being, and our body engages with our environment and reflects our environment. And there's a lot we can do to optimize that. And I've learned about that process when I was going through a recovery from a traumatic brain injury. So as a neuroscientist and an acupuncturist and a TBI survivor and a mother of 3, lover of nature, I have resonated and lived with Amanda. And I'm so excited to share some of that experience and knowledge with the audience today.
Wonderful. So I want to set the framework right away by talking about masculine and feminine energy in terms of yin and yang, because they can be, in a sense, used interchangeably. And sometimes when we hear masculine, feminine, we think only of gender, but really we're talking about a sacred energy form that lives in nature and lives in the world around us. So can you explain the energies of yin and yang, where they come from, and then how they work together to create this harmonic dance between masculine and feminine?
That's a big, I could talk for a
question.
whole hour about
I
that.
know.
There's a lot
summary.
of I'll give a quick summary. The yin and yang, if people are probably familiar with what that looks like, it's symbolized by this circle that has this curve. I don't know if it's cosine curve or sine curve, but it's a bending curve. And in the crux of one of the curves on one side, on the black side, there's a white circle. And in the same opposite crux on the black side, there's a white circle. Now, there's a lot of meaning in there, like how this moves, and that symbol meant a lot to indigenous cultures of East Asia, especially the Taoist practice. So it can get cut in that philosophy or realm of thinking, or sometimes people take it in a religious way. When I look at the yin yang symbol, I talk about balance and relationship and this dynamic between energy, right? So energy can be really broadly defined here. And we get into that. Everything has a yin and a yang in its relation. Nothing is like pure yin or pure yang. Those are those middle circles in the sea of black or the sea of white. It's like basically saying that the essence of one, or the birth of one, is in the other. So opposites are really needed in the world. And you really can only know something by also knowing its contrast.
Mhm.
So that this contrasting knowledge and this awareness of how these things relate makes a big difference. Everything has yin and yang, but like, I don't think of anything as like purely yin or purely yang. So masculine is seen as this yang energy. It's much more active. It's fiery. It's really bright. It's more go out and get it. It's the energy that makes something come forward. Where yin is that nourishment. It's that substance. It's that dark, deep, cool, like transformative process that is really creating the raw materials from which the energy is then transformed into being built or of something, right? So in today's world, we can like parallel that with a lot of things, and the masculine and feminine are one of them. So you think the masculine of this extreme machismo, young, strong, muscular, loud, boisterous, action-oriented, going to get it, ordered, masculine energy. And I think today's world is very that way. It's mechanical, it's systematic, it's structured, and that makes us really successful in a lot of ways. But when we get too much of it, comes at a balance, and then we have some of the dysfunction or disruption in the system occur, right? And I think this is part of like creation, or just the journey of life itself is like constantly going through this flux. The contrast to that yang aspect is the feminine. It's the yin. It's this nourishing, this deep, this more reflective, contemplative way of being that engages strategically, and is really important and also much needed, and is kind of the response and how to balance that active energy. Like we need to come down and cool it. Like we have to run our engines to get where we're going, but then we also have to nourish and cool our engine so that we can keep going. That is kind of the yin and yang in a nutshell, and then the masculine feminine. And what I like about the masculine feminine in this depiction is that it's a spectrum, right? Like this conversation in particular, I think is important because gender identity is a spectrum, right? Some people identify as that more yang type of person. It could be type A too, like that more yang, masculine, type A, ordered type of person, or more the chaotic, go with the flow, yin, but like nourishing can still be really put together, but also more organically going and willing to be creative in the process, not needing to be as rigid. That's more yin. It's much more feminine. It's much more inward drawing, but also giving forward something calm or still. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was beautifully put. And I think most people have a primary essence that they identify as having. And I think because we live in a more yang society, more masculine centered society, some of us who are more yin essence, feminine essence by nature, might grow up with the conditioning that yang is supported in us, masculine is supported in us, and we start to feel out of alignment or that something is funky. And this is really at the heart of, in a lot of ways, where I working with high achieving people, type A people, high performing people. Many of them are yang essence, and I work with that demographic in a different way than I would someone who has more of a natural yin essence. And this is really what we're going to talk about, is this dance between what it looks like to be someone who identifies as having more of a yin essence in this conversation, and operating in a structure and a society and a work environment that reveres and honors the yang as being tied to worth and to success even, and working in that realm. And before we get into that, I'm curious, is there a way to talk about, so we have yin, feminine, yang, masculine, in terms of nervous system expression? And that's a big question too, but I love talking to you about this because this is a really unique perspective that you bring. And I think you and I both identify as having more feminine essence. And so we can share about the nervous system from that perspective, when it's often shared in a very logical, forward driving, mental way. We can bring this embodiment to it. So kind of curious about your perspective on that.
Okay, say that one more time. Like the
Yep. So yin, if we were to talk about masculine and feminine energy in terms of nervous system expression.
Yep. Okay. So that is, I think about the autonomic nervous system, which is, for viewers who that's a new thing, it's like our most primitive nervous system. We did talk a little bit about this in our first recording. It is around 13 minutes. So just skip there if you want to get into this a little bit deeper. But it's our basic nervous system that the rest of our higher power is built off of. Every reptile has this brain. It's reflexive. It's fight or flight, right? So you have either fight or flee, which is a sympathetic nervous system branch. We're going to get a little in the weeds here, but stick with me. And that's more yang. That's much more active. It's like, I hear a crash, I'm going to run, I'm going to fight, I'm going to prepare to like get this done. And it's really a high rush of energy. It's when people lift up the car and like save their child, right? And then you have the parasympathetic, which is the balance to that. So we have to go into this rest and digest state to be able to break down our food, to be able to build our immunity from our bones, to be able to heal and clean up our brain, to restore our system once it's done this very yang thing. We need the sympathetic balance. Now, the yin is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic is the yang, right? So the masculine would be the more like, I'm going to go fight, I'm going to go get it, I'm going to provide for my family, I'm going to go retrieve the things, I'm going to do all of this stuff. And then the yin, traditionally, or like in this extreme example, is the nourishing, the feminine, the tending to the children, keeping the fire going, like building, clearing the water, fetching the water, getting the meals ready, like those or feminine attributes that even throughout cultures, like women are the ones who are building community and connection and like structure to life that the men are sustaining or providing for in this way. So that's an extreme part of the feminine and masculine. And then the yang would be the sympathetic fighting part of our nervous system that's ordered and getting things done. And the yin is the sympathetic, the rest, the feminine piece of that. Does that clarify that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to summarize it. And I think you might have switched them one or two times, but I'm just going to summarize it for people listening. Maybe you're taking notes, that could be kind of fun.
A little
you're tuning
bit.
in, but think feminine, yin energy, parasympathetic.
Parasympathetic, yes.
So the parasympathetic is with the yin. And then we have masculine, yang, and then sympathetic, which the sympathetic, and we often, I think we can, put a bad taste with the sympathetic nervous system because it is in overdrive because we live in a masculine centered society in general, but this is really what unleashes energy and gives life. It like activates. It's like the fire, the spark. It's delicious, And
it gives us that vigor, that fire, right? Like it's what gets us exciting. It's adrenaline. It's the rush. We can talk about it in terms of hormones. Like it's like testosterone. We're like, you're actually feeling good about what you're doing and you're getting things done. You're providing. Like nothing is right or wrong or good or bad. It's just figuring out how to balance it. And I identify as feminine, like through and through, but there's definitely circles or areas of my life where I step into kind of a different mode where I'm like, I have to be really careful not to be too okay with chaos and go with the flow. Like I do need some structure here. And I can almost feel my body step into a different state of activity or function. And it depends more on that sympathetic or fight or get it done, that more yang masculine activity that helps me feel successful. And in today's day and age, with the world of, it's really like this industrialized world that runs on this machinery of how to keep things going and is really productive in a lot of ways. That's how we operate in this culture on the global level in that regard, in those spheres. And then women can feel like they have to be more cutthroat or more high achieving, or they have to sacrifice more with their family to fit in this mold of the successful, driven, more yang type. But the yang success or masculine success is the success that's more traded or prominent and visible. So almost like getting an award or successfully achieving these things, that is kind of a masculine or at least a yang form of energy around success. And what can you put off to show your success. Like, as I like have a spring behind me, like this is like, yeah. What do you parade around to like show the world that like you have accomplished some things and you are masculine, you are that yang, like you've done this, you are successful, you are like, even think back to our biology, evolutionary biology, like you have this ability to provide for the world and create more. That can feel like what the world needs because it's in our biology, right? Yeah. So as you're working with high achievers, especially ones that might function in a more flux way or just feel good, more yin way or feminine, like helping us remember that that's also okay. And just because the yang is what you see or what's paraded or what's announced or what's more visible does not mean that it's what's more important. And I think that that's lost.
And I love how you mentioned that the energy of providing the contemplation, and that is, what are you providing to the world? Because I think often when we think of providers, we think in terms of family, but I do see that a lot in my clients, of this sense of worth with like, what am I providing? How much impact am I having on the world, and to what scale, and what am I giving to the world? And that tied in with a sense of worth. And I'm curious, I know you touched a little bit on testosterone, but in general, and again, knowing that these energies are expressed in a spectrum in bodies and in the world, are there differences between kind of the male female hormone system? And I know we don't have to get too much into this, but like testosterone gives you energy to put forth into the world, and how does estrogen work, and how do these energies play a role in male and female hormones in general? Because I think there's so much that we could dive into with the female hormone system of like operating on a 28-day cycle, and living in a masculine centered world means that hormone system isn't supported. So I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole we could get into, but I just want to touch on it.
Dive into that so much. I would love to do a whole hour, just like a group discussion about that piece, right?
We could,
because that's the stuff, right? And there literally are entire degrees on this conversation of like hormone relation into this. Like when I was going through school for acupuncture, I had just given birth to Aliana and was in recovery, and then got pregnant with Noelle. Like the hormonal changes women go through are so huge. And I absorbed everything I could that traditional East Asian medicine had to teach about those things because it was relevant to my life. And then afterwards, after my severe TBI, about a year or so, I joined a practice working just with hormones and just with like balancing that for fertility and for menstrual cycle regulation or menopause or like these shifts, even for men. Like, how do I learn to be potent, or what do I do to like get my sperm count up? Like, that's a question that actually regards a deep answer, because women are really in touch with this. We bleed every, if it's the 4 weeks perfect cycle, every 28 days, and then we ovulate every 12 to 14. And like, we feel that differences in our mood swings, in our energy levels, in what we want to eat, in our activity, in our social mannerisms and things. Like everything in our lives and how we operate can be measured or impacted by these changes, or men just static. Like, I mean, that's a oversimplification as well. All of this is going to be, but like men have like, they're pretty set, and they're just like always primed to be ready to expel sperm, because that's what they needed to be fertilized, or be able to fertilize a female whenever she was ready. The chaos is the feminine, right? The masculine's always ready, at the ready.
Yes.
And when the women are able to receive in this fertility piece, well, the egg is available to meet the sperm. That's when the man needs to be on the prowl, like just ready to pounce. But the woman will have a different change in her sex drive, and her biology will govern whether she will let a mate close or even yearn for that kind of touch or feeling. And then once that hormone shifted again, like she may go back to this place of like no libido, like no interest, or more wanting to draw in or draw out. It's cool to look at traditional cultures and how they would, like how there'd be shifts in like the engaging of men and women. This is where we can get really deep with this discussion. But for women, we have like in that 28 cycle, we ebb and flow around our ovulation and around our bleeding through a yin and a yang piece. So while testosterone is a yang hormone, and get this, like everyone with a male body has yin or has estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they're just in different levels.
Yeah.
Everybody with a female body has testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. They are just in different levels.
Yeah.
And they are governed by the gametes or the sexual organs our body has and our neurology. So how our neurology sets our circadian rhythm, which is kind of this clock of rhythm, our body, like when we get hungry, when we go to the bathroom, when we sleep, it's set by our environment and our neurology. This engages and influences our hormones, which influence all the things I mentioned earlier. And in the masculine world, we can get we operate in systems that just expect us to always be the same, very level. But when the woman comes in, she has areas in her cycle where she's going to be peak activity. Like her yang energy is going to be like super high. She's going to like just about burst forward in the world, right? And then after that burst, she might have to go down into a more like yin part, right? Where she's like restoring and regenerating and like rebuilding and like sitting with that to transform it and then releasing it or creating a life. Like sometimes in Chinese medicine or traditional East Asian medicine thinks that energy cycle can be used powerfully to like fuel our life and fuel our accomplishments. And this is a cool thing, being in a feminine body. I feel like gets squished out in a masculine world. But like in the traditional East Asian mind frame, if you take it to the extremists or like monks that practice Taoists will tell you, like you can feel that just like you would to give birth to a life, you can feel that energy to give birth to like real things you want to see done. So women can learn this cycle and use it to their advantage to pace themselves. It's all about pace themselves so that they can operate at their peak, which looks different than a system that runs on a steady stream.
Yes, that's it. Like this energy of yang, always ready to go, always ready to like penetrate the world versus having this zoomed out. Yeah, it's great. But then the balance of having, and especially if you have this hormone system, having the balance of leaning back and riding the waves, cyclical beings, seeing things in a slower, more sustained way, and knowing that not every day will be the same. And you're not always going to be ready to like jump into the world and go get it in a yang way. So that's a great example of understanding context of being in a feminine essence body and trying to operate in this world where it's like every day ready to like get up and go get it. It may feel like a mismatch to you.
I think about just like the where we are in the history of development and time, right? We're like not that long ago, women started coming to the workplace. And before that, the workplace was this place where men would go and they would go provide. It's a very young environment. So by like no surprise am I thinking like, oh, this is a system that's been set up here. But with this transformation, this revolution that happened where women are starting to be more on the forefront and come to bridge that, enter that more young environment, and like men conversely are going in the yin spaces and providing for their family. They're taking their kids to play dates and signing them up for camps and cooking the dinners, right? Like there's a shift here that culturally can feel really different. I think in the development of humanity, it might be kind of different or new. I don't know about many traditional cultures where like women are revered, but their work isn't always as outwardly expressed. That's systemically masculine because of its nature through history. So it's really interesting to be in this time of women being able to be connected all over the world and access this kind of information and have the resources to be able to do this. And it's really fun to exercise that as a woman, because I identify as a woman through and through, but like, it does feel so good to go out there and like accomplish shit. Excuse my French.
Both.
So, like, it does. And I have high ambitions. Like, I do want to
Yeah,
have that
you do.
impact in the world. And like, I want to
Yeah.
make a change for the better. It's from like a really feminine aspect where like, I want to see my community thrive, and I want to tend to all of the people and all of the needs of the community to make it work well. But in order to do that, I need to engage masculine energy, whether it's my own or the world around me. Like, I have to play with that and be ordered and be on point and fall into those type A practices. And this is where some people who are type A or type B will feel like displaced. And nothing is wrong. It's just relative, and finding a way to be healthy in that, and sometimes push yourself to do the uncomfortable. Yeah, maybe you are more yin, but you're gonna have to be yang sometimes. Maybe you're more yang, like you're gonna have to be yin sometimes. Like, that's the conversation I think that we miss because of the strength and the outwardly projection of the yang masculine, that we have to remind that masculine energy, it's as important for it to come down and learn about the yin as it is about the yang. And this is where privilege comes into place, right? So that's a whole other conversation we could dive into. I don't mean that as like a snarky revolutionary thing, but like, if you really break down what privilege is, and when you're like in that mainstream mindset, you don't know what you don't know. So like, learning how to balance it or engage with each is really important, so we can start to have real conversation and just respect and regard the differences of the two and know that they're all great.
Yeah. And we are in a really unique time where we're balancing these energies and contexts. And that's why this conversation is so interesting, because it's feminine energy in a masculine world, specifically in a work environment, I would say, if we want to really zoom in. But I just want to acknowledge anyone who's tuning in right now, because it is fun to connect with other people on this topic. And I want to know if those tuning in feel like they have a feminine essence and that they're navigating that in a masculine centered world, and what that feels like. Hi, Vision. Vision said, hi, ladies. So happy you have made this live. Yeah, we love it. I mean, Sophia and I are going to be doing some more live streams like this, because it just flows for us. And yeah, we work really well together. And it feels like we just have these conversations anyway. So we're like, we should just film them. Vision says, learning so much. I'm definitely more yin. And this is making so much sense to me. I've struggled in my work environment, but I believe my balance is off. I'm going to have to rewatch for sure. Okay, so this is great. We have created the context, and we've talked about it in terms of yin yang, in terms of masculine, feminine, nervous system. Let's talk about some ways that we can advocate for yin energy in a masculine centered world. So for people who are tuning in, who are like, this is me, they've identified, like, this is resonating, I feel this. What are some things that we can do to create a soft landing pad for our yin energy, to listen to it, to hear it, to feed it? What would that look like?
Ooh, this is a big question. And I think it's leaning into those things that are more yin in nature, like resting, reflection, listening to music, not pushing yourself to the limit, but allowing yourself to restore. So going back just to the hormonal question, I think about, for women, like, can I rewind just a second to go back to that yin and yang breakdown of hormones?
Yeah,
so if testosterone is very yang, we think of like, oh, estrogen is a female hormone. It's very yin. And then we have progesterone, which I think is a lot more yang in nature, but is really a key component of the women's cycle. So through that, when I was working with fertility, I was thinking, like, what do I do when someone is more yin deficient? What do I encourage them to do? I think about like eating foods that are really nourishing to your blood or cooling in nature, like deep greens, cholera, spirulina herbs, or like algae, I think, that are really building like B vitamins and iron and feeding mitochondria, like the function of things. Eating bone broth, like nourishing that, is really a yin food. These are moistening things. But also doing things like deep breathing or checking in with yourself, filling your cup first, like allowing yourself the moment of like a deep breath, or taking this time for yourself just to do that, not to be accomplishing something, is really important and really helpful. Doing things like meditation or yoga, what we provide here on like Science and Magic portal, is so impactful. Learning about different things so that you can figure out how you want to apply them in your life. That's a yin thing to do, right? The application is the yang part. It's like when you're going out and you're doing the thing. But like sitting back and like taking it in and reflecting on it and seeing what fits or what doesn't is the work. That's the deeper inner work. That is the foundation through which then you go and make choices and do stuff, right? So like reminding yourself it's okay to take that time, sleeping well, breathing, doing those things, super important. I think is if you're in a female body and you have these cycles, learning to ride with them. So when you're in the first part of your cycle, right, from your period to when you ovulate, that's a much more yang type. So being able to do more activity then, and being able to like, go through, do stuff then, be more functional then. And then when you're building, after you're like done bleeding and you're building this lining, that's much more yin. That's like a building up, like nourishing a thing, right? And that's a little bit more like take some time to recover, do things a little bit slower, go more inward with your things. Don't necessarily push yourself 110%, just push yourself like 80%, and like make sure you're sticking with your food and your rhythms and your routines to sustain you so that you can fall into that. Then you get this burst of energy around ovulation. And like, that's a yang exercise, right? Activity. Start being a little more functional, more active at that time. And then building up to when you start bleeding, like that's when you have this buildup of energy. So that's when you're in a much more yang time again. And then you might have a little bit more to go for it. Maybe you can push yourself to stay up to make that last deadline, or push yourself to run a little bit harder at 105%, get the extra mile in, or 5 miles, whatever it looks like for you, or 10 feet, I don't know. And then once you start bleeding, like, no, you're going back into that losing of energy, and like, you're going to need to replenish that again, start the cycle over. Like, you might be able to push through at first while you have this peak to get that moving. And then after you're done bleeding, you're right back in that yin cycle up until you're ovulating again, like restore, rejuvenate, breathe, like practice those things, those rhythms of like rest that fill your cup first, so that when you have this yang energy rise up and come forward again, you're conditioned and better to be there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think we might need to have a conversation just on female hormone cycle. It's so juicy.
It's a whole other degree.
I know. We have Tish. Hi, Tish. Good morning, ladies. I found myself getting burned out in masculine dominant areas, tech, finance. I'm definitely interested in learning how to balance my energies. I like you mentioned restore. I'm realizing the importance of rest when it comes to feminine essence. And I'm thinking of the women, the feminine essence beings who they want to rest and they have to wake up at a certain hour, and then they go to this masculine dominated work environment and they're like, okay, yes, rest, but like, what does that mean during the day? And I'm thinking, okay, so you really put that yang energy forward all throughout your workday. And there's ways you can sprinkle in rest and move slower throughout your workday, but really being intentional. I remember when I had my full-time job, it was only for 2 years. And then I was like, I have to work for myself, but I would transition every day after work. I would go to a yoga class at 5:30, get out of there at 6:30. And I felt refreshed, because what would happen to me is I would just be like, I couldn't get out of that go, go, go mode, and I couldn't switch. And a lot of women specifically have a hard time coming back to their families, to their partners, and sinking back into that feminine energy, because there's so much adrenaline coursing through their body throughout the day. So maybe some techniques to come down off of that masculine drive if they're in that masculine work environment and they have to drive forward during that. And I mean, like I said, there's nuances there. Like throughout the day, you can encourage softness, but just specifically for this situation, how do you come down off of a really go, go, go day?
That's
and
a
coming to
great
rest.
question.
Yeah.
And it's something I'm continually learning. And it brings up difficulty because I work in outpatient rehabilitation in a busy clinic. And like, it's to be functional, to be able to be successful in that environment, you have to be pretty young.
Yeah.
And it's changing back into a different mode of operating that it can be really hard. And I don't work in finance, and I just hear and I imagine it sounds like, oh, tech, those sound like really difficult masculine industries. And I really encourage when you're there just to look for ways, like small things, to still embody that feminine. And you had shared not to talk too much about, like, that's not the focus here. I know, but I think it starts there.
You can
like,
let's talk about it, but I think that'll be good.
I think like figuring out relationships there that might nourish you more, and just being more calm about being different is okay. And sometimes you might be surprised by how many people are just like relieved and refreshed by that a little bit. You still have to operate more masculine, but so like coming home into a more relaxed environment, it really depends on what your home life looks like. I really envy your story, Amanda, where you had the freedom to just like go to a yoga class for an hour and like unwind and do that and feel that contrast. As a mom, I'm like always feeling I have to be home an hour ago. Like, I can't believe I'm still not there. Like, why? Like, if I have to be rigid on my time so I can get there and then enter that state and like do all things, just different things. And I'm always nourished by our conversations and our relationship, because you remind me, or you bring about this calmness, the stillness I have within me, but you help me draw it out, which is very feminine, to be able to do things like have rituals, like light an incense. Smell is so profound. When I get home, if I take off my clothes that I was working in and like enter home life, that's a signal to my body. And then I light an incense. And then I smell that smell, and I'm like, okay, no, I'm just like, I'm chill here. Maybe I put on some good music, and I just like am there. It takes some time to make that transition. When I come in the door, I'm not like, oh, here I go. I'm like home. I like take off all my stuff. I like have this routine getting into my home pace now. And it looks like different clothes. It looks like maybe, having incense on or incense burning, so that I can like then relax while I'm doing the dishes, or relax while I'm helping cook dinner, and not operating in this like as rigid, structured pace, which I like to do. I know it can be difficult to run a family with that kind of relaxed state. And there's realities of like times people need to get practices, or people need to get picked up there, or they have to do this project, or you need to run to the store to get that for them tomorrow for that thing. There's always stuff, right? Even in a family, there's structure. But allowing yourself the moment to just make a change into a different place, and the more signals you can give to your body sensually, like what you're wearing, what you're smelling, what you're drinking, maybe like how I have my hair tied up. Like sometimes when I'm working, I'll tie my hair up differently and be like, this is work mode, like we're gonna do this. And then now it's down, so like that means something different to me. I don't know, like for every body or every person it might look a little different, but finding that, taking some time to reflect on what that will look like for you, can really make a difference to be able to enter that different mode of operating.
That's so good. Yeah. We have a comment, transitioning. I definitely need to do that because it's killing the polarity in my relationship. And I love what you shared, Sophia, about like simply changing your outfit. So it's like, do you have a silky robe to wear, or just soft clothing to put on? I love the idea of like, if your hair is tied up during the day, let it out. Lighting an incense, putting on your oil diffuser, because for me, I had the time, and this was in my early 20s. My life is shifting and has shifted, but like that, I had an hour to go to yoga after, but not everyone does.
Great. What privilege.
So these sensuality cues, engaging the senses. I even think of like, as you're doing the dishes, can you put on some music and kind of dance as you're doing the dishes, because you have to do it anyways.
No, so engage your senses. Yes,
engage your senses.
Huge. Like we get so much in our head, and it's very young, right? To be thinking about things like we have to think through this and manage it. But like, let's just feel it. Let's just like smell it, taste it, touch it, hear it. Let's use those things to get into our autonomic system to be regulated differently. The senses are so connected to that fight or flight or rest and digest regulation that, like, if you feel like you need to get into a different mode, listen to something that brings you there, or something that brings you a memory of being there, like a smell or like a song. Maybe you're listening to like pump up rap music to get moving, right? But like, let's put on some like classical Zen chill guitar to like just unwind. Use those things to not think your way through the transition, but to feel your body into it. Whether it looks like going to an hour yoga class or just putting a different shirt on and smelling a bottle of essential oil before you chill out and do the next thing. So and the topic about relationship straining, I'm sorry to hear that, straining a relationship, but I relate to that. You know, I feel like as I'm very feminine in my operating system, and my like my default is very yin, comfortable with chaos and just kind of working creatively through it. Everything will work out. I think is kind of the way I think about it. Make the most of what you got. And then my husband is very yang. He's much more masculine. He's much more ordered, type A. And it can be very frustrating for him to operate with me because I'm much more laissez-faire. And I have to learn to operate more systematically at home. And that sometimes doesn't feel very good to me because I'm like, this is my yin space. This is my home. And it's practical. Like I do need to operate that way to get the kids where they need to go or do the things, right? Or be a good partner that can be depended on. But it can be hard to understand a left-handed person as a right-handed person. It can be hard to understand a sympathetic person as a parasympathetic person, or type A, type B. Like there's always some learning or tension that needs to come up or does come up with that meshing of life or contrasting. And it can come out differently for each relationship. So thanks for sharing. And I think that that's a totally interesting conversation of topic.
Isn't
right?
it? Yeah. We have engaged senses, switch up the style, and slow down. That's a great way to summarize it. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you for the awesome recommendations, especially the yoga piece. My yoga mat has been woefully ignored. I want to say too, I said I'd go to an hour-long class, but you can hit your yoga mat for like a few sun salutations
in the morning is great, or in the evening, just to like make a transition. Like I want to redo that too, so let's do that. Let's like get back to it and just pick it back up and revisit it, but make it something you want to do. Draw yourself in, and then experience it when you get there.
Experience it when you get there. Be in your body when you get there. The struggle for me is that there's always stuff to do at home. I think a lot of people can relate to that. I have to learn to slow down, breathe, and still accomplish the things needed to be done for my family. And these tips are so helpful. I'm so glad you guys are enjoying these tips. And I know we have probably a few more minutes. So if you have any final thoughts or questions, you can share them in the chat. Definitely give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you're interested. Sophia will be live streaming later this month again with me. And I'm actually going on again later today. I'm going to talk about feminine warmth. I'm feeling in my flow. So you can keep an eye out for me going live. Is there anything, final words you want to say, Sophia, about kind of like advocating for feminine energy and feminine essence as someone who has that essence, but has a family, has a masculine centered job, is always go, go, go. Like any final words you just want to send them?
I think when I'm doing my best, and it's always a thing, like sometimes I do a really good job, sometimes I'm not. When I'm doing my best, I'm prioritizing those restful rhythms. So at my best, I'm getting up in the morning before my family's up to take 15 extra minutes to myself to do literally 5 sun salutations on my yoga mat. And that's all it takes, like just that. And then I enter my day a little differently. And I go through it, and I'm very young in that, but like I remember to pay attention to water. Now water is very yin, it's very restorative to the parasympathetic nervous system, very feminine. It's like the feminine. Fire is masculine, water is feminine. So I get in a rhythm, which is a masculine thing to do, with my water. And I like relate to drinking water. If I'm doing my best, I drink 100 ounces of water a day, and I have a 5 goals throughout the day to get me there. And that's a Yang thing to do, but it's to nourish myself. And as I'm doing it, even though it feels like work sometimes, it's like making me able to sustain what I'm doing. And it reminds me of what's really important. It's not the things I'm doing. It's like how I am being in the world.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
it's not
feeling
that
like
thing.
that's
Yeah.
important, right? And it's not the things I'm doing that are
It's
important about my life or me.
it's how we could say that like 3 different times because the high achievers who listen to my channel, I'm gonna say it again. It's not the things that we are doing in our life, but the ways that we are being. If that is feminine essence, that's yin energy. The way that
Right.
we're being. That's a
The way that we're
beautiful way.
being. Yeah. And that's it. I think Glenn and Doyle had this quote in this book that just literally said, she just wrote to her, like, you are enough, period. Like the first time I read that, I just like broke down in tears. And it was this moment of realizing like I'm running in this rat race, feeling like I have to do. But like, when have I actually just taken a moment to realize like I am enough? Like I don't need to do to be enough. Like I am enough. And from that place, what am I doing that's fun, exciting, or detrimental? Like what am I contributing that maybe like actually taking away from the ability of other people or the opportunity for other people because I keep pushing myself to be in the forefront? I don't know, like that's a piece of it, is like knowing that there is a lot more welcoming to life if we can be still, just as much as being active is productive in life.
Yeah. So just in closing, some ways to advocate for your feminine energy: engage your senses. So sight, sound, taste, like let your senses be a part of your day. Nourish your relationships. I did hear you say that at work. So focus in on the relationships where you feel cozy. It's a very feminine thing to link into relationship and to nourish those. So even if you're at a high-paced tech job, focusing on, connecting to others, being in your heart. I also heard slow down as much as you can, and then focusing on that transition. I say the transition happens throughout the day. In this example you're giving of water, like you have structure with how you drink the water, but then you're noticing the water. So transitioning between the masculine and feminine, and then finding ways to connect to your body. However long you have, just if it's 5 sun salutations, if it's a stretch, if it's a breath, connect into your body.
Yes, because the body is the yin part, right? Like the activity the body does is the yang, but the actual body is the yin. So if you really want to plug into it, like that's the substance, that's the yin, right? Do that. Through feeling it, through sensing it, like through using it to get there. And you're going to be better going out doing the things if your yin is nourished, right? Healthy, strong, eating, drinking well, sleeping well, playing well.
And all of this is at the heartbeat of my work. So if you're tuning in and you're like, I want support with this, definitely check out some of my coaching packages, my website. I'll link that
your work is
below.
so good with this. You do this amazingly. You bring it in my life, and I'm so grateful for all you do for me, Amanda. Because I know on this journey would not be the same for me if it weren't for you. So thank you so much for this opportunity to kind of share this juice that we've discovered together, doing life for the past 15 years together. And thank you, audience members, for tuning in, for listening. A lot was said. Please send in questions or reach out to us, because we'd love to keep talking about this and clarify things.
We could too.
There's so much. So thank you. I have to go because I have a patient coming.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. I'm gonna sign off. Goodbye.